Hello and welcome back to another Giant Slayer TFT Top 10 video. This week our analysts are diving into the top 10 splash traits and champions for rank. Splashing a trait means using one or two champions to get the buff of the trait, such as Mystic providing magic resistance to the entire board for only 2 units. Splashing in a champion is the same concept, except it's because the champion is strong on its own. The list won't be in any particular order of strength, as each trait or champion is viable depending on the right circumstances. But before we begin, please don't forget to click the links in our description. Give your support to everyone who helped make this amazing video happen. We host many TFT tournaments with plenty of exciting content to come, so be sure to also follow our Giant Slayer TFT social media pages. All right, let's get back to the video. Starting with number 10 on the list, it's Mystic. Mystic is the quintessential idea of a splash trait, as you can easily fit in 2 Mystics to most compositions later in the game to give your team magic resistance. It's the most commonly splashed trait in set 2, especially with quite versatile champions like Janna, Karma, Soraka, and Nami. Master Yi is a bit more limited, as he's more of a carry champion than a support, and as such fits mostly into builds like Shadows. Generally, you'll look to add in Mystic around 7 or 8, and that's the stage of the game where Mystic will begin to get the most value. It can be played earlier, but oftentimes it's unnecessary, as magic damage isn't as big of a deal early on. Mystic also pairs well with a few other 2-piece traits such as Lunar and Cloud, though you don't need those in order to play Mystic. Speaking of Cloud, they are number 9 on our trait list here. While Mystic is definitely the most common, Cloud is not far behind, as it's a great trait to splash in. With just 2 champions, you can give your entire team a 20% dodge buff, which is quite a lot when it's affecting the whole board. Mystic is a bit more versatile in the champions, but on a Cloud map, it's easy to fit into Cloud with Janna, Yasuo, and Keanu. Generally, you'll look to play this trait later in the game, specifically to counter more physical heavy compositions that other players may have. One of the reasons Cloud is such a great splash trait is also due to Lux. Cloud Lux is one of the best Luxes you can get in the game, because you can easily fit her in at level 8 or 9 and instantly give your team the dodge buff. Speaking of Lux, she is number 8 on our list. As mentioned, Cloud Lux is one of the best Luxes to splash into a composition in the late game. That's not the only reason why Lux is such a great champion to put in, as so many of the other elements benefit from putting her in. In particular, some of the best are Cloud, Ocean, Crystal, and Electric. The other elements are also viable in the right situation, but those 4 provide a ton of value in that right situation. Ocean Lux gives your whole team a small bit of mana generation and does superbly well in the Ocean Mage compositions. Crystal Lux is one of the best defensive elements, as Crystal is such a dominant trait later in the game, and having access to 4 Crystal is absolutely huge. Much like Crystal, Electric Lux opens up the 4-piece trait of Electric, which is quite powerful with other champions like Zed. Basically, whatever the situation is, there's a likely chance putting in a Lux will be incredibly useful for your composition. Definitely at the top of the solo champions to splash into late game builds. Let's talk about a combination of a strong champion with a trait at the number 7 pick, Taric and Crystal. Taric on his own is one of the best frontline champions to put in the late game when 2-starred. Even without Crystal, he is still quite tanky, and his ultimate will often single-handedly win you late game fights. Whenever you're wondering what to put in at level 8 or 9, oftentimes Taric is the best option to go for, especially if you're able to give him defensive items like Guardian Angel or Bramble Vest. With that said, he does shine even more when you get Crystal in, whether it's with Ashe, Skarner, or Crystal Lux. Generally, Ashe and Taric are paired together in a Ranger composition, but even outside of that build, you can look to put those 2 in at level 8 or 9 for almost any composition. This will give you a strong frontline with Taric and a decent assassin bait with Ashe for your backline. Another legendary tank that is great to splash in is Amumu, coming in at number 6 on the list. Much like Taric, Amumu is a nice answer to the question of what champion to put in at level 8 or 9. While Taric will have more impact on the fight as a 2-star, Amumu can be a decent choice even as a 1-star, because the AoE of his stun is still large. Amumu will commonly be played in builds using Infernos such as Shadows, or in Rangers with Kindred and Varus. But even outside of those situations, he's a valuable frontliner due to his ultimate providing a lot of CC, and because of how large his AoE is, you can give him a Morellonomicon for even more value. We definitely have to mention our number 5 pick, Malphite, when we're talking about CC. CC. Malphite has consistently been one of the best frontline champions to play in the mid game and late game purely because of his ultimate CC. His versatility in any composition usually ups his value on any map, even if you're not looking to play Mountain. That said, Mountain is a decent splash trait in the mid game if you're on the Mountain map, as Keanu is another strong champion that you can pair with Malphite. Unfortunately, Mountain is a bit too situational to be on our list, but that doesn't matter for Malphite as he's such a useful champion. It's almost worth trying to slot him in, even if you can just get him 2-starred and not use the Mountain trait. Malphite will do really well with items like Morellonomicon and Guardian Angel. Let's move away from the frontline champions and talk about our number 4 pick, Karma. Karma is a great example of a champion that excels on her own without traits or items. Because of her shield and attack speed buff, she's incredibly useful at boosting any carry, whether it's a physical carry or a magical carry. Look to play her around level 7 next to your carry, though she pairs best with champions like Azir or Twitch. While she doesn't need her 2 traits to do well, it's worth noting she's a great addition to any composition because of Mystic. Lunar is less valuable after the early stages of the game, but because it's a 2-piece trait, it's often played with how versatile Karma is and how strong of a frontliner Leona is. But as we've said, she really doesn't need either to be played and has the added benefit of not needing any items whatsoever to be very useful. Continuing the theme of Mystics, our number 3 choice is Nami. Unlike Karma, Nami isn't quite as versatile to splash in any situation, but once it's late game, she can be a great champion to play because of her massive CC. Oftentimes you see her primarily played for Mystic or in Ocean Mage, but don't let that fool you into believing that she isn't useful on her own. Despite nerfs, she still has one of the best crowd control ultimates in the game with her wave. Not only does she hit a large portion of the board, it also applies effects such as Morellonomicon. Definitely a worthwhile legendary champion to put on your board in the late game, especially given that she can provide you Mystic. All right, let's move on to the number 2 spot with Singed and Poison. While Singed is a great champion on its own, it's worth combining him with the Poison trait, as you're unlikely to see Poison played without Singed. Poison did get nerfed in 10.4, but despite that, it's easily one of the best traits to splash into the late game. It is commonly seen as the last trait added to Rangers, Predators, or Berserkers at level 8. The fact that 3 distinct builds can utilize it should point at its versatility, but even outside of those compositions, it's viable to be played in most builds if there's enough space to fit in 3 champions. Besides having a strong splash trait with Poison, Singed is just a powerful legendary unit on his own, especially when given a Morellonomicon, a Jeweled Gauntlet, or a Death Cap. With items like those, once he's 2-starred, he essentially becomes the carry of the build all by himself. Coming in at number 1 on the list is Keanu. Keanu is easily one of the most, if not the most, versatile champions of set 2. With her element changing based on the map, it opens up a lot of opportunities to run traits in ways you wouldn't be able to otherwise. In particular, the best example of this is with Cloud, which is just so much easier to splash in with Keanu when you're on a Cloud map. Mountain is another great example of Keanu being a great splash. That all said, you don't even necessarily need to play around her element, as she's just great on her own as an assassin with CC. Give her a Zephyr and place her in the back corner, and oftentimes this will let her jump on the enemy's primary carry, and she'll be able to CC them for a good portion of the fight. Keanu is definitely one of the best champions to put in any build as early as level 6. All right, that is our top 10 splash traits and champions. While this list is definitely influenced by the meta, it's worth noting that traits like Mystic and Cloud have almost always been great splashes across all of set 2. Their design definitely shines, and hopefully there's even more traits like them in set 3. Before we go, let's do a couple of honorable mentions. First up, let's just talk about Mountain. As mentioned, when talking about Malphite, Mountain is quite niche, and because of that, it wasn't able to make our top 10 list, but it's still incredibly useful during the mid game. What really holds back Mountain is by the time it's being played with Malphite, the buff isn't even mattering that much since it's only on one champion. Because of that, it really limits the situations that Mountain is playable and how much impact it has as a splash trait. That being said, it's still fantastic to play on a Mountain map with Keanu, so look to try to splash it as early as you can if you're on that map. Our next honorable mention is Lunar. Lunar is an odd trait because the champions are far better than the trait itself, and because of that, you will see Lunar played fairly often. Why this trait isn't quite good enough to be on the top 10 list is that the power falls off hard as the game moves towards the mid and late game. Why this is because the trait wants time to ramp up to provide more and more power, but fights in the mid game often end before it has time to do a second round of buffing. But as mentioned, this trait has two strong champions with Karma and Leona, so you're going to see it played often. Even without getting much value of the trait itself in the later game, it's still perfectly fine to run just because of the two champions. That is going to be it for our top 10 splash traits and champions for ranked. Set 2 has really showcased the strategic strength of splash traits and champions, so hopefully set 3 continues with this design. What traits have you found most useful in your games? Be sure to let us know in the comments below, and remember to like and subscribe. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you all in the next Giant Slayer TFT video.